We are possibly 24 hours from knowing who will be president of the United States of America in 2025, or we could be talking about this in 7 days, 10 days, 70 days. I don't know what is going to happen, but to help me go through this and other big stories, I have Seamus Bruner. Seamus, thank you so much for joining me again.
Hey, Stephen, it's great to be with you. Yeah, it's exciting times. Hopefully we get the results soon, but there's plenty of reasons to think we won't get them soon, and that's really unsettling.
It is, and I want to go through those with you. You know, last election cycle, you probably noticed, like I did, Donald Trump, we all went to bed with him up very high in many of the most important states. And we wake up the next day to Joe Biden magically winning, somehow becomes president, losing 18 of the 19 bellwether states or counties, many other shenanigans. But you guys have put out a report as people today are in line voting. I want them to keep their eyes vigilant, but I wanted to go through this list of this report that you've put out. The top 50 threats, ways that there could be cheating in the 2024 election. Let me switch over to the threats themselves. So you guys lay this out: dark money and foreign influence, lawfare operations, GOTV operations, voter fraud, and election fraud. I've got up here on the screen the 50. Which of these are you guys most concerned with, or are you concerned with this being all 50 of them playing a role in this election?
Yeah, well, all 50 are certainly going to play a role in this election. We started out this report by just making a list. What are all the things that we find sort of suspicious or wrong, or what makes our elections insecure? And it's the obvious things, of course, like mass mail-in ballots. And, some of these get out the vote operations are certainly shady. No voter ID, no proof of citizenship. And then as the list developed, we found that there were 5 categories that one of these 5 categories, most threats to our election fall into. And so the dark money, that's a huge one. And one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough in the dark money and influence category is the undisclosed in-kind contributions. That would be when Google censors results. And so let's say you search for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and all you get are positive Harris and negative Trump articles. That's a donation of sorts. I mean, it's an almost incalculably valuable donation. That swings 10%, maybe more percent of the voters one direction or another. Those are election swinging numbers. I would say that possibly the largest threat, and they're all interrelated in many ways, is the non-citizen voting. We have found that it is exceedingly easy for non-citizens to get onto the voter rolls. And in some states like Arizona, it's almost impossible to get them off of the rolls. There was just a story out of Ohio the other day, how a non-citizen, a Chinese man, was able to cast a ballot in Ohio, and they can't even get the vote disqualified. So that vote will count. That's going to happen all over the country, especially in swing states. And why do we view this as such a big risk? Well, 10 million plus non-citizens have found their way into the country since Biden and Harris took office. And, if we're talking 10,000 here, 10,000 there voting, small fraction of the total amount, those are election swinging numbers. We know, like you mentioned, there were just 5 cities where, the count gets shut down overnight. We're talking Atlanta, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit, and others. Phoenix, Arizona is another one of these cities with these huge counting centers, and technical difficulties or water pipes breaking caused the count to stop. That's a huge threat. The count cannot stop until the results are known. And here's why it matters when the count stops, is that's when the shenanigans take place. All of the election monitors, all of the bipartisan, nonpartisan people watching, the election watchers, they go home, the journalists go home, and then you see the videos that come out of, they resume the count, they start feeding the ballots into the machines again. That's a problem. So we could probably spend the whole time on this, but I'll happy to talk about what else you'd like to talk about here.
Yeah. Do you believe that the ZuckerBucks which weren't really talked about until after the 2020 election, do you believe that those played a large role? For those that don't know, it came out after the election that Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, for some undisclosed reason, decides to give $400 million to the elections, and 90% of that money goes towards getting Joe Biden elected in swing states and in certain swing cities with drop boxes and different things. Did that have a huge shift in the election?
Yeah, it plays a major role. It's something that we can't accept, can't allow. Now, I will say that ZuckerBucks, a lot of states, it's good news. A lot of states have banned them. I believe it's around 26 states, but not every state. And just because the state bans the ZuckerBucks doesn't mean that the local jurisdictions, the counties, let's say Fulton County, which is Atlanta, or in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, some of these counties are still accepting ZuckerBucks, which is totally wrong, but it takes years to litigate. And what ZuckerBucks really are is the private funding of public election infrastructure. So Mark Zuckerberg poured, like you said, over $400 million, and all of that money, most of it, flowed to blue jurisdictions. So these swing cities, swing counties, and then they use that money, these counties, to put drop boxes in predominantly blue neighborhoods. So it's harder for Republicans to get their ballots to the drop box, but Democrats have a drop box every other block. That's just an example that multiple investigations confirmed. And so we can't have this. And we've talked about this before, Stephen. These are called public-private partnerships. This is what the control oligarchs who we've talked about are all in favor of, where private corporations handle certain aspects so that they get all of the benefits of no FOIA, no transparency, and they get kind of the clandestine side of the private part of the relationship, but then they get the power of the government to implement things. And so big tech does this a lot. They partner with the government. These public-private partnerships, which is really the brainchild of people like Klaus Schwab, that is a huge problem. It's going to be a problem in this 2024 election, and it's something that we need to keep our eyes on.
Okay. Let me, I'm going to pull up the swing states here. This is the most up-to-date polling that we have. Of course, a lot of the pollsters, they're now putting out their final predictions. There's no more rallies happening. Maybe there's ads, maybe there's signs, but right now, these are the main states here on the screen. We have Arizona predicting Trump 2.1, plus 2.1. Pennsylvania just barely squeaking by positively, 0.7. Georgia, 0.5 above for Trump. North Carolina, 0.4 above for Trump. Wisconsin, 0.3. Nevada, 0.1. And then Michigan going to Kamala Harris. We'll see if these last two big endorsements from the Muslim and Arab American community can sway Michigan voters, or even Muslim and Arab voters around the entire United States, as Trump being the one that will bring peace to the Middle East. What do you think of? I've been having a hard time making sense of all of these different polls, because if you're looking at like Reuters, ABC, CNN, a lot of those are still highly favoring Kamala Harris, although CNN has been open about her favorability being too low, the fact that she is seen as an incumbent president with a 3.5-year negative track record. What are your thoughts on these swing states and these polls?
Yeah, well, I've never personally been polled. I've never had my cell phone called. I feel like the polling, the methods for polling are pretty antiquated, where they call people up. I mean, you get a big sampling bias for the type of person who wants to answer the phone. So it's hard to put stock in these. And Donald Trump talked about this on the Joe Rogan podcast. Probably the most reliable form of polling is the internal polling, the one that the campaigns pay millions and millions of dollars for to actually find out where their resources are needed. Most of the time, you don't see any of that polling unless it's positive. So, it's hard to trust that unless, sometimes it's just meant to show, it's a media fixture. Putting polls out is this kind of this horse race thing where the media will put out polls. The great Rush Limbaugh always said polls are not meant to gauge public opinion. They're meant to sway public opinion. And now we have this new type of thing with the Predict It and the different betting markets. I don't find those particularly reliable either because let's say you're a Donald Trump supporter, you want to hedge your bets so that if Donald Trump loses, you still get some cash out of it. So you would actually place a bet on Kamala Harris. You don't think the elections are particularly secure. So some of the people who've made $20 million bets, I would say that they actually believe that that person is going to win. But it's hard to say in the betting markets if someone is betting as a hedge or because they actually believe the person's going to win.
One of the biggest damages done under Biden and Kamala Harris has been the destruction of the US dollar. I hate to say this, but the US dollar has lost 26% of its buying power. You feel it and I feel it. Meanwhile, inflation is out of control and the cost of everything is up. But so is gold and silver. Think about this. If you had to bet on gold or the US dollar and where it will be 20 years from now, are you betting on gold or are you betting on the US dollar? For me, I know historically gold is going to go up. Let the experts at Colonial Metals Group help you and your family. Their professionals can help educate you on the history of gold, the value of gold, and how to put it into a self-directed IRA. So whether you own a 401k or an IRA and you're looking to shelter some of your money from exposure to the market or the US dollar, or whether you're brand new, or maybe mom and dad have asked you to help them be better at protecting their money as we go into the future, Colonial Metals Group can help. Now, we've put together a special offer. Reach out to them and learn about gold and silver. And you could get a safe as well as up to $7,500 in free silver. Just let them know that you came from the Stephen Gardner Show. Now, you can call them at 800-807-2143 or reach out with the link below, colonialmetalsgroup.com/Stephen-Gardner. All right, let's get back to that interview. Yeah, good point. Let me put this back on the screen. Okay, so this is Kalshi. And they have been showing Donald Trump highly favored. And then about a week ago, out of nowhere, Kamala Harris ripped back into basically 50-50 territory. And then after a couple of big interviews like Joe Rogan, Kamala Harris skipping Joe Rogan, and then this scandal with the FCC where they didn't allow Donald Trump on their network, but they allowed Kamala Harris to do an SNL skit in front of 20, 30, 40, 50 million people. These are also kind of hard to weigh. Now, I've heard that these are a lot more reliable because people are putting their money where their mouth is. But do you think that these are 100% fail safes, or does it all just come down to if people are willing to bet on the person they believe will win, or maybe they bet the opposite, so they vote Trump, but they vote Kamala just in case? Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, again, I mean, I don't hold a lot of stock in any of these things. I mean, it's a good kind of weather vane to see which way the winds are blowing, but they can be gamed. I mean, as the betting markets play a bigger and bigger role in determining who's going to win, there's a bigger and bigger incentive to game those betting markets. So if you put $20 million on Kamala and all of a sudden it says she's favored to win, does that actually mean that the entire country has switched and starts believing that Kamala is going to win? Or is it just because a handful of whales have put their money on her? And so it's really hard to say. I mean, I wouldn't want to say one way or the other, but I don't put a whole lot of stock in it. I think it's all of these things, the confluence of factors from the betting markets to the polling, to just kind of, like what you see at the rallies. I mean, with the enthusiasm, Axios ran a story actually that said there's a big enthusiasm gap. It's hard to believe that, meaning they say Kamala has far more enthusiasm. When you look at the rally crowd sizes, which seems to be a pretty good indicator actually, that people are showing up, they're taking time out of their busy day to go watch one candidate or the other speak. You know, the Kamala rallies, they all have big celebrities. Like they're going to watch let's say a Beyonce concert, and they sort of gamed their supporters on that side by saying that Beyonce was going to perform. A lot of people were upset that she didn't actually perform. So I would put just as much stake in rally crowd sizes as I would in betting markets.
Okay, interesting. The only reason I look at those is a lot of the polling data in 2020 had Joe Biden and Donald Trump neck and neck. And I didn't know about the betting market. It was actually a guy over on the Patrick Bet David podcast. He pointed out, he said, you know, the gambling websites showed Joe Biden in favor, even though the polls were neck and neck. This time around, you know, it's showing Donald Trump with a double-digit lead. But I guess at the end of the day, I can't remember who says this. Polls don't matter, people matter. And so we got to get out. Although I will say, you know, a lot of the data, according to Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, Steve Bannon, others, they are saying that Republicans are voting early like we've never seen before. And yet the polling data shows that there are still a large number of Republicans that plan to cast their vote the day of. So I don't know. It'll really be interesting to see where this ends up. Okay, I mentioned Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is out of prison. He's the War Room, one of the most successful podcasts in America, over on Rumble as well. He kind of had two main messages coming out of prison. Number one, that former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had pulled strings to illegally have him locked up to get him off the Donald Trump re-election campaign trail. And it seems he's looking for ways to get back at her. The second was this whole list of patriot, conservative, populist ideas for Donald Trump to put into place in order to establish the United States as a dominant force around the world again. Your thoughts on Steve Bannon, his arrest, and his plans for Donald Trump?
Yeah, we're all very happy that Steve Bannon's out of prison. It was an absolute witch hunt. He was a political prisoner of Nancy Pelosi. It's just ridiculous. I mean, so many people on the other side have violated or not shown up to Congress when they were subpoenaed. I mean, Eric Holder famously was in contempt of Congress and didn't show up. Yet Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro are the only ones who've actually seen prison time over it. And so that was, I believe, a absolute move to get him off the chessboard for the most critical months before the election. They get him out just days before the election, and he's one of the best strategists, political strategists in our modern times. And so he engineered the Trump 2016 victory. He engineered a lot of the MAGA movement that Donald Trump ran on. I mean, a lot of the immigration, all of the economic populism and economic nationalism policies. And so it's great that he's out. It was a shame that he was away for so many months. But it was a political prisoner operation by Nancy Pelosi, and it's good to have him back.
Yeah. Steve Bannon and specifically Peter Navarro, they were among the first in the Trump cabinet to blow the whistle on COVID and say, wait a minute, this is not what we're being told. This data is being manipulated in Fauci's favor, in Big Pharma's favor. Of course, a lot of those truths have come out too little too late now. But hopefully we can learn from those and never be hoodwinked again. I'm grateful to see him back out. You had written over on X that while serving as Attorney General of California, that AG Kamala Harris allowed a Chinese spy to interfere in the election and then to go without any kind of consequence or repercussions. Tell me about that story. I had not heard that before. Seamus, I need to take a quick commercial break. Do you owe back taxes? Pandemic relief is over. Along with hiring thousands of new IRS and field officers, the IRS has kicked off 2024 by sending out 5 million pay up or else letters to unfiled tax return and balanced owed owners. Now, don't waive your rights and speak with the IRS on your own. They are not your friend. Tax Network USA, a trusted tax relief firm, has saved over $1 billion in back taxes for their clients, and they can help you secure the best deal possible. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, they can help. Whether you owe business or personal taxes, even if you have the means to pay or you're on a fixed income, Tax Network USA can help you finally resolve your tax burden once and for all with the IRS. Again, do not reach out to them on your own. They are not your friend. I want you to call 800-958-1000, or down below, you can click tnusa.com/Gardner. All right, now what were you saying?
Yeah, this was we were shocked when we found this. I mean, not totally shocked because of how embedded Chinese spies are throughout California, especially San Francisco, where Kamala Harris was as the DA. But this really ties in her mentor and paramour, Willie Brown. It's a Chinese spy by the name of Rose Pak. And Rose Pak was influential in San Francisco specifically, but all of California politics for decades. And so this story, when Gavin Newsom steps down as mayor of San Francisco, this is late 2000s, early 2010, basically. When he steps down to become the lieutenant governor, a man named Ed Lee fills the seat. He's the interim mayor of San Francisco. He says that he's not going to run, but then he gets drafted in on a draft Ed Lee effort. Run, Ed, Run was the name of the campaign. It turns out that campaign was totally finessed and financed and backed by Rose Pak, the Chinese spy. Willie Brown was one of the backers of this effort, and so he's kind of a partner. Willie Brown was with Rose Pak to draft Ed Lee, and so. And it's funny because it brings in Soros-backed prosecutor, now notorious, wasn't back then, George Gascon. And so George Gascon was the district attorney there. It's a very incestuous relationship, as I know you know, Stephen, living in California. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's friends with everybody. But the Soros-backed prosecutor, George Gascon, he was supposed to look into this. People had on video pictures of Chinese spies and operatives of this Rose Pak operation, helping people fill in ballots for Ed Lee, collecting ballots and harvesting in ways that were allegedly not legal. And so George Gascon, he actually was pretty close with both Willie Brown and Rose Pak. He tries to recuse himself from the investigation that transpires. His deputy, by the way, was on the payroll of one of these organizations set up by Rose Pak. So there was a very clear conflict of interest with George Gascon and the people perpetrating these alleged crimes, the Chinese spy group. So they kick it up to Kamala Harris, Attorney General Kamala Harris of California. She's supposed to look into this. Now, of course, she's as conflicted as anybody, but basically what she does is she punts the investigation. It all goes away. Nobody ever was brought to justice on this thing. And Rose Pak was, continued to operate as a Chinese spy for years after that. So it's a little rich. Kamala Harris likes to, bill herself as this person who cares very much about foreign influence. She did this in the Senate, saying that she wanted to get Russia out of our elections, et cetera. She said nobody fights harder than she does for, no foreign influence in elections. That's just not true. She had an opportunity to bring justice to a bona fide Chinese spy operation, and she did not do it.
Okay, interesting. Okay, wasn't there a congressman in California that was sleeping with a Chinese spy, Eric Swallow or something like that?
Yeah, Eric Swalwell and Fang Fang. You've got, of course, Dianne Feinstein. I mean, she's the mentor of Gavin Newsom, late Senator Dianne Feinstein, and her husband Richard Blum. They for the 80s, and Feinstein, Di-Fi, she was the mayor of San Francisco decades ago. So she opened the door back in the 80s to Chinese foreign influence in America. Her husband got hugely rich off of deals with China. She mentored Gavin Newsom, who we've got an investigation on him coming out very soon on all of his Chinese connections. That is the gateway. It's the golden gateway for Chinese spies into America. And Kamala Harris was right in the thick of it. She could have done something about it, chose not to.
Okay. Speaking of China, I've been seeing on the internet people claiming all these connections between Tim Walz and China. He's been going there for 20 years. Apparently, he had a love affair with a Chinese dignitary's daughter before he was married. He's been back many, many times. You and Peter Schweitzer have done extensive research on corruption and collusion between American officials and the Chinese Communist Party. Is there any truth to these alleged connections between VP candidate Tim Walz and China?
Oh, absolutely. We're actually about to, I just finished this story. It's going to drop either today or tomorrow. It's a huge story that the Chinese Communist Party, they operate these overseas Chinese service centers, also known colloquially as secret police stations. So they had one in New York City that was busted by our FBI, and it's run under China's Ministry of Public Security. That's kind of like their version of the FBI. They set up these overseas service centers to do all kinds of things. None of them are good for the United States. And so now we found one of these service centers operating in Minnesota, right in the Twin Cities in St. Paul, between Minneapolis and St. Paul. And the guy who runs this thing, his name is Dr. Binwen Yang. We've reached out for comment. We're waiting to hear back. He's actually attended Ministry of Public Security events in China, and he's listed as the security liaison officer for the Overseas Chinese Service Center. Well, we've got a bunch of photos of him with Tim Walz. We've got Tim Walz, a keynote speaker at several events backed by Chinese Communist Party outfits. Very recently, Chinese websites, Chinese government websites list a propaganda chief in Minneapolis by the name of Ding Ching, and she is in many photos with Tim Walz. We've got all the sources. We've put some of it up on Breitbart before, so I've already got a bunch of photos there. But we've found a whole lot more. It's very unsettling, and we actually found, first of all, that Tim Walz has taken money from these Chinese operatives to his campaigns, and also that the Minnesota government has awarded hundreds of thousands of dollars in American taxpayer money to Chinese CCP linked and backed entities in Minnesota. So the money just makes a continuous loop. They fund Tim Walz, his government funds their entities, and all the while they're spying on us. Yeah.
I remember covering those Chinese police stories out of New York. Pretty crazy how much they've infiltrated. I've had CIA spies on my show, and they say that nobody spies on America more than the Chinese. They're always making Russia the boogeyman, but China is just quietly collecting data, whether it's spies on the ground, secret police, COVID factories out in California, weather balloons crossing over military bases. They seem to really want to keep their ear to the ground when it comes to the United States of America. I wanted to put this another story back up. I don't know that you've had time to go through this one, but Kamala Harris wouldn't go on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. She said she didn't have time, yet she diverted her airplane to go be on Saturday Night Live. Well, he had Congressman John Fetterman from Pennsylvania on, and Fetterman openly confessed to the fact that the border is wide open so that the Democrat Party can bring in tens of millions of future voters. And he openly talked about how, whether these people are able to vote or it's legal, either way, through the census, we're going to be making blue states bluer, and we're going to be making red states purple. And then he specifically focused on Texas, saying, that we're fundamentally changing Texas into a Democrat, stronghold down the road. What are your thoughts on this guy just being so open about the fact that, he's basically answering the questions to a lot of the conspiracy theory that Republicans have been putting forward?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly slipped up. He's done this a number of times. I'm not sure he's all there. He had all of those medical situations and seemed to be having strokes or whatever it was. But yeah, Fetterman definitely slipped up. He said the quiet part out loud, as people like to say. And this is absolutely the strategy. I mean, among several others, we've got an open border invasion project going on, and we're looking at. I mean, we talk about it all in the election threats report. That's why I say non-citizen voting is the biggest threat, because you're not going to be able to get 10 million people. You may get some number, but I'd be shocked if it's 1 million. You're not going to be able to get 10 million people out of here who cross the border illegally. But here's the thing: is there is a concerted border to ballot box pipeline. It is a very organized process getting them onto the voter rolls. I mentioned Arizona. Over 200,000 voters in Arizona have never shown proof of citizenship, and a judge, the Supreme Court of Arizona, ruled that they will be able to vote. So some number of those are non-citizens, illegal migrants. And that's obviously what a huge part of the motive for getting them in here is, because the minute that they get here, they get given all these government services. And this is what Joe Rogan says to Fetterman. I mean, I got to hand it to Joe Rogan. He masterfully kind of laid out how the process goes. It's like they get all of these benefits. Why would they not vote to continue to receive benefits? That is kind of like, it's in their interest. And so they're going to vote for the people giving them all of the benefits. And all of these NGOs that are helping facilitate the border invasion, they know that the end goal is to get Democrat voters. So all along the way, they're giving them literature. There was a great investigation that showed the organizations in the Darien Gap, these are globalist NGOs, giving out literature on, like, let's say, transgenderism or all of these kinds of things, very left-wing type propaganda literature. And so that's just the tip of the iceberg. Once they get here, they get plugged in with different NGOs who sort of teach them that this is what America's about. There's something called refugee critical theory, refugee crit, that there's children's books that are trying to teach critical race theory to new migrants, teaching them that America is a deeply racist place and that they need to vote a certain way to fix it. And so, yes, it's a concerted effort. Fetterman admitted to it, but many others on the left have admitted to it too. I mean, Tom Perez, he's talked about how the goal is to get more voters, and all kinds of others, Stacey Abrams. So they slip up every once in a while and admit that is the goal here.
Okay. You and Peter, you guys have been studying what most of us would call the deep state, this unelected, bureaucratic block of people that run the country but aren't voted in. Nobody knows who they are, but they have specific goals, programs, budgets they want to protect or increase at the expense of the American taxpayer. What do you think or maybe what is the vibe or the feeling in Washington, D.C., if Donald Trump is able to get elected? I mean, Vivek has talked about making major cuts. Elon Musk, who's been invited to be a part of this government Department of Government Efficiency group, they've both talked about cutting the government spending by about $2 trillion and the workforce by anywhere from 50 to 70%, and that will make it more efficient. What are your thoughts? I just have to imagine that this block of unvoted in individuals is not going to go into the night quietly.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we saw it in 2016. It was the FBI in coordination with Five Eyes and CIA operatives who manufactured the Steele dossier to stop Donald Trump from getting in, and colluded with the Clinton campaign. This is all the way to the top. James Comey and all of his deputies, Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. That's 2016. Then in 2020, we had the intelligence community put their fingers on the scales again with the calling the Hunter Biden laptop Russian disinformation. That was totally debunked, but not after a bunch of people voted thinking that all of the stories about the Bidens cashing in on China, cashing in Ukraine, after they thought that those were just Russian lies. And so those are kind of election swinging events. It's also happening again now. You've got, Victoria Nuland, who she's State Department, but she's very swampy. She was on Maddow the other night, Rachel Maddow, saying that Russia's interfering in this election. I think people, both sides, have probably grown a little weary, but that not everybody has. You see their Ukraine flags in bio, et cetera, all over X and other social media platforms. People still believe that Russia is going to, that Donald Trump is the Russia Putin candidate. But yeah, there's a huge amount of stuff at stake for the permanent political class, the warmonger class. That would be, Nuland and so many others. They want to keep the gravy train flowing to Ukraine, even though it's been proven in 100 different ways that money is being siphoned off and effectively laundered into the pockets of contractors and oligarchs. And But yeah, war is profitable. All of these things that Donald Trump is saying that he wants to end, like he's like day one type stuff. And of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has a huge stake in exposing the misdeeds of the intelligence community from the past. And so all of the people around Donald Trump, the deep state, so to speak, does not love those kind of people.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about Jeffrey Epstein using this tactic of blackmailing famous people, political people, those people letting him off until they couldn't anymore. And then, he magically ends up dead when cameras turn off in prison. We now have Sean Puff Daddy P. Diddy Combs. And from what I'm reading, this guy has extensive tapes on politicians, A-list celebrities, elites, influencers. What connections or similarities have you seen in your research between the P. Diddy situation and the Jeffrey Epstein situation?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that blackmail is a central component of both of these operations, and that's evidenced by the tapes. Jeffrey Epstein had vaults and safes and entire bookshelves filled with tapes, catching people on tapes. His houses where the people would come and engage in these relations with at times underage sex trafficked victims. Why are they rigged up like a Christmas tree with with video cameras? That's just bizarre. And the only reason to do that is to catch people on camera for the explicit purpose of blackmailing them. Same thing with Diddy. He's got all of these tapes. You see how they operate. I talk about in Control Oligarchs, like exactly how the blackmail works. He actually, Epstein did this on Bill Gates. He got him involved in a relationship with a very young, I don't believe she was underage at the time, but a very young ballerina / model. Bill Gates, Epstein solicits money from Bill Gates, basically hush money, like I can expose you for being unfaithful to your wife. But when it gets all the more valuable when the victims are underage. That is career-ending, life-ending, not just marriage-ending type compromising material. And so that is what these things are about. In addition to the depravity of the people who engage in it, they kind of just are sick individuals, the people who would go to these Diddy freak-offs with stuff that we probably just don't want to talk about, but really, really disgusting stuff. And so it's tragic. And this is the kind of thing that's going to continue no matter who gets elected moving forward until all of the accomplices are exposed. We know that Epstein had clients who spent over $1 billion. We know the amount, over $1 billion. Why don't we know who they are? It's insane that we don't know who the accomplices are, who the clients of these operations are. And until they're fully exposed and justice is brought to all of them, this kind of stuff's going to continue. And just on the deep state point, we know who has the client lists. We know the people who have all of the evidence. It's the intelligence agencies and the FBI who have raided these. They've taken ownership of the videotapes and all of the material. And so they've got this compromising material. That's an unsettling thing in itself. You got the world's most powerful or influential people going to either meeting with Epstein, going to his island, or going to these Diddy celebrity freak-off parties. And now they are all compromised by our intelligence agencies. So Why aren't the intelligence agencies revealing who it is? Because then they lose the power over those people.
Yeah. Oh, good point. Good point. Yeah, because the same FBI that was holding the Hunter Biden laptop is the same FBI that colluded to say that it was a lie, even though they were holding it and they could see all the disgusting material that was on there. I wanted to bring this up. Witness in Diddy case claims to have tapes with intoxicated celebrities and minors. He was on News Nation going into great detail. He did not release any names other than P. Diddy's girlfriend and a few other people that are listed there. But it does seem that Mr. Combs was going to great lengths to gather information against these celebrities and politicians so that he could hold things over their head, whether that was the inability to move their music contract to another group or to get favors done, or think how long this story has probably been held at bay because of politicians and very, very wealthy people that don't want their name getting out there. I think it's interesting how they have all this information. They then bury it under ongoing investigation, and then we never get to hear or see who is a part of these disgusting blackmail campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, there's two major ways to motivate a person. It's one by paying them, and that's bribing. You know, if you wanted to get a politician to do what you want them to do, you can pay them to do it. Or the other is leverage. This is leverage. If you have leverage, blackmail, compromising information over them, they move far more quickly. They'll do whatever you want so as to not ruin their entire life. You know, you can't, their life isn't ruined by taking some money, you know, as a campaign contribution or other, but their life could be totally ruined if you release the photographs that you have on them. And so this is the most powerful way to get a person to do what you want them to do, this leverage, this blackmail. So it's not really surprising that there are these these things like the Epstein operation or the the Diddy operation. I'm convinced, I mean, I think the prosecutors are convinced and everybody else sort of knows that Diddy is not the only person involved in this. He was not even probably the entire mastermind of the whole thing. This is a whole group. I mean, if not intelligence backed. I mean, we know that the Epstein operation had intelligence backing.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of that, obviously we know the FBI coordinated to cover up the Hunter Biden laptop. The CIA at the very top, Gina, the head under Trump, she colluded to cover this up. Fake stories, intimidating social media. Today, there's a breaking news story over on the Daily Mail where ousted CBS reporter, award-winning reporter, Catherine Herridge, says that she was tasked with proving whether the Hunter Biden laptop was real or not. She says this was a missed opportunity by CBS News in order to tell the truth because there was so much information showing the corruption of the Biden family. She then goes on to say that even knowing that they did an interview with President Trump and correspondent Leslie Stahl, where she lied on national TV with 60 Minutes, that they did not know whether this was true or not. Catherine says, I watched the broadcast. I felt sick because she knew the truth. She knew CBS News was lying and covering up. This is why former President Donald Trump refused to do the 60 Minutes interview, which is kind of a run for president tradition, because he knows that they were lying. Also, it appears that Nora O'Donnell also knew. She was part of some of the big Donald Trump stuff with, what do you call it? Oh my gosh, I'm having a total brain fart here. Anyway, she was a major part of this election cycle. And according to Catherine Herridge, she prepared all of this for her, and she refused to cover it. Why do you think that people were maybe threatened with having their jobs taken away if they reported on this? Do you think there was a massive pressure campaign from the FBI, the CIA, Antony Blinken that none of us are fully aware of yet?
Yeah, well, the Twitter files uncovered a great deal of it. There was a working group, a hack and dump working group. It was organized by the Aspen Institute. It brought in the intelligence community with the media months before the Hunter Biden laptop was a known thing. Nobody knew what it was, and it was really odd now that we have the documents, because Twitter executives, Yoel Roth, ex-Twitter executives, were in attendance and in coordinating with the intelligence agencies and with the media to censor this story. What's interesting from these documents that came out was that, like, they knew that it would be a Hunter Biden related, laptop related scandal. And so nobody in the public, Rudy Giuliani and John Paul McIsaac from the laptop shop in Delaware, they had not come forward yet. And yet the FBI knew about it. And then the FBI works together with some of these control oligarchs, that would be the Aspen Institute entities, and the media and the social media, and they're all on the same page. The public doesn't know anything about this stuff, but they coordinate, and it's the top media executives and the top personalities who all get on the same page. They sync their talking points together to say that this is all Russia disinformation. And then it just rolls downhill from there. People at the news outlets realize what the going narrative is. They kind of, I mean, whether the threat is explicit or implicit, it doesn't really so much matter. I mean, it's worse if it's explicit, obviously, but people know when you're in the media, you know what you're not allowed to talk about. You know, you can't really buck the trends or go against what your media outlet is reporting. And so they all get in line because they like to be in the club, in the comfortable media club.
Yeah, well, there should be a reckoning for 60 Minutes and CBS. I mean, just based on what they did this year, but then 4 years ago, I mean, it's taken 4 years for people to have the courage to say they knew, they lied, they covered up, and then pretended that they knew nothing. I noticed on your 50 ways of potentially taking over an election, I don't see the FBI and the CIA. Is that
it's number 2 on the list? I believe
number 2.
I can't read it from here, but I believe
number 3, intelligence community and bureaucratic influence. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was on.
It's a top threat, absolutely.
Yeah, and it does make me wonder, okay, if they did all this and we didn't find out for 3 or 4 years, what are they doing today? What are they doing right now that you and I will be talking about in 2027, 2028 as the truth comes out? Seamus, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your election day to come on and go through this with me. If people want to learn a little bit more about your books and what you guys do, is there a website that people can visit to learn about the in-depth research that you and your group does?
Yeah, certainly. So actually, as people are voting or in line voting today, I would encourage them to look at that report. You can go to thedrilldown.com. It's up in the investigations tab. So you go to thedrilldown.com, and out in the top right, there's an investigations. It might be on the front page somewhere, but that shifts regularly. But you click on investigations, you'll get to the report. I recommend you read through the top 50 threats and see. I mean, you think you're familiar with all the ways that they can cheat, but you are the first line of defense. If you're in line, you need to be keeping your eyes out, looking for anything fishy. You can report any threats, take photos, take videos. If they try to stop the count or say that the printers are run out of ballots or anything like that, you can go to www.reportelectionthreats.org. You can fill out a complaint with us. I recommend documenting what you see. And then for my book, you can get it at controloligarchsbook.com. And you can follow me on all platforms at Seamus Bruner, and definitely follow Peter Schweitzer. He's posting some great stuff.
Okay. I will put links to all of that down below. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have you on again. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Stephen.